Ooh, hey, how's it going? Back once again to talk about season 2 of Breaking Bad. Looking forward to it. What is up, Matt Duncan? Indeed, I guess it is Anton Jackson time if you phrase it like that. But yeah, as I was rewatching this episode as the previous episode, I again found myself enjoying it so much. How can I not watch it from a complete Breaking Bad? Without a complete perspective of Better Call Saul now, and actually some scenes here really got my mind sort of percolating in respect to the overlap of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, in respect to a couple of plot lines as well, and a couple of very significant plot details, if you will, that I'm actually really looking forward to discussing here in this episode. At John 82, one of my favorite episodes. Can't argue with that at John. Not at all. What is up, Hine? If I'm pronouncing that correctly. But yeah, unbelievable episode here. A scene in the very beginning which really made me think to the plot of Better Call Saul, and dare I say, maybe now encapsulates a potential plot hole. I hate to be that guy. I feel like I've already kind of become that guy who's nitpicking all of the little details of a Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad and sort of pointing out the trivial inconsistencies of this plot. But, why stop now, I suppose? So, yeah, really looking forward to breaking down this one. But, of course, cold opening scene here. Real rock and hard place vibes, if you will. Definitely a sort of early Breaking Bad thematic element of these episodes that is displayed to us here, where the ending of the episode is shown at the very beginning, if you will, very akin to the pilot of Breaking Bad. And of course, we see the Mexican. Well, I don't know if it's technically Mexico here. It's actually not. It's the probably the southern border of New Mexico and Mexico. But don't remind me of Nacho at the Pattern Slice 9900. But yeah, real rock and hard place vibes here, where we see the sort of ending scene here displayed to us very cryptically, where we see Jesse Pinkman's Monte Carlo bouncing up and down here. The shot displays to us various different components of what will come at the end of this episode. There's a lot of great close-up shots of the M16 shell casings here and the broken glass from the bullet holes, which are shot into the Monte Carlo. And of course, we get this very last scene here of the Monte Carlo jumping up and down, completely shot out. We see it's Jesse Pinkman's car with the vanity captain license plates. And again, as I've definitely noticed during my third and fourth and fifth watch of this episode here, I definitely didn't notice this the very first time I saw this episode, but you can definitely see the legs and boots of Tuco Salamanca underneath this car, as this is the location of where he is shot at the very end of this episode prior to Hank Schrader approaching, because we know when he finally does approach Tuco at the end of this episode, the Monte Carlo stops bouncing and the, I guess, what are they, hydraulics run out, if you will. I'm not 100% sure about I'm not a real card guy, so if it's not hydraulics, someone can correct me on that. What is up at Stone Yoda? What is up at Justin Cruz? Hine, amazing synchronicity, as I literally just finished sending email to my friend about you doing Breaking Bad retrospectives. How can I go to sleep now? If you are in Europe, I apologize for that. It's pretty late where you are over there for sure. I apologize for that at Hine. But really looking forward to breaking down this episode for sure. And unfortunately, I actually have to step away very quickly, unfortunately, but I will be right back. I apologize. I apologize for that. I had to step away real quick, but we're back. So, yes, getting back into it here, like I said, what is up at the Recovery 716? Hine, I am in New York City, but wake up at 3 a.m. to go to work. My goodness, that is very early. All right, I apologize for keeping you up then at Hine. I'm sorry that I can't do these streams a little bit earlier, unfortunately, with my schedule being what it is. But, well, like I said, I appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight, even if it's just for a little bit. I really appreciate the support in any capacity. It really does mean a lot. But yeah, getting back into this episode here, like I said, a very brief shot here of Tuco Salamanca underneath the car. And of course, at the very first watch, it's not a dead giveaway by any stretch of the imagination. I always did wonder what was going on here. And to sort of, I guess, not jump too far ahead here, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm trying to remember back to my very first watching of this episode all the way back in 2012. And I'm trying to remember if I actually thought Tuco was going to die here when I saw this cold opening scene. And of course, with the benefit of hindsight and retrospection, it is kind of crazy to think that such a consequential character such as Tuco Salamanca is meeting his demise in only the third episode he appears. Oh, no, excuse me, not third episode. Yeah, fourth episode, excuse me, that he appears in. What is up at Kate Valentine? At the Recovery 716, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. I really appreciate the support. This episode, for me, just behind Ozymandias, is my second favorite episode. This one made me fall in love with Breaking Bad. When Hank comes in the end, I cheered. Yeah, I mean, this is an episode for sure at the Recovery 716, and I know I couldn't stop singing the praises and superlatives of Season 1 of Breaking Bad, and thank you again so much for the support. At the same time, I have to say that Season 2 is pretty amazing as well. I mean, there's just so many great elements of this season. I love just all of the character development that happens over the course of the season and all of the various different plot points, and even a very subtle detail such as Jesse Pinkman's apartment that he has next to Jane. That's a really kind of cool sort of, I don't even know what the word is. It's almost even a little bit sentimental, where it's a very sort of cool location in the plot of Breaking Bad, this sort of new apartment that Jesse moves into, and we only get to see during Season 2 of Breaking Bad, and we never get to see it again. Of course, we first see Jesse's house in Season 1, and then we see it again in Season 3, 4, and 5. It's a pretty key staple in the plot of Breaking Bad, but yeah, there's some sort of very sort of interesting connection that Season 2 has with me. Again, if you weren't sold on Season 1, how can you not be totally sold on Season 2 as well? And yeah, I mean, this is a great episode. There's so many great episodes this season at the Recovery 716, and yeah, it's hard for me not to keep singing the praises of it. Of course, this season also brings us the greatest scene in Breaking Bad history of Skyler singing Happy Birthday, Mr. President to Ted Beneke during his birthday party, which we will get to eventually when we cover Mandela, the third to last episode of this season. So I know everyone's really looking forward to that as well. Unbelievable scene. I know everyone rewatches it every single time and they don't skip over it when they're rewatching that episode. But yeah, at the Recovery 716, this is a super intense episode for sure. Again, it's great. There's so many great scenes in here, and my goodness, as I was watching this episode for the 30th time again, I was still laughing uncontrollably during so many of the great scenes with the bell and the lucidity of Hector Salamanca first being displayed to us in the beginning of this episode, but and the sort of back and forth dynamic of all of that, and of course the very first time he rings his bell, which I will get to later in this review. But yeah, great episode through and through. It's up there. I never actually really considered how I would rank it in respect to all-time Breaking Bad episodes, The Recovery 716. But yeah, that's a great sort of question for sure. It's definitely one of my favorites of Season 2, and I mean, wow, to compare it to Ozymandias is really something. But yeah, it's an unbelievable episode, and I really enjoyed it. And thank you again so much for the super chat and for all the support. Thank you so much. At Hine, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Pretty cool there. I'm not sure if there's a sort of double meaning on all of that, but I appreciate the support. Thank you so much. What is up at Kate Valentine? Justin Cruz, how's it going? At Henry Lemoyne, I apologize for that name if I mispronounced it. Thank you so much for the $10 super chat. I really appreciate it. Tuco was hilarious. He says about Hector, old people. You feed them, you put them in a really nice crib in the country, and then it's a run-down shack in the middle of the desert without air conditioning. Yeah, that's a great sort of quote right there for sure. And there's a whole sort of another dynamic there that I definitely noticed when I was rewatching this episode about how Tuco truly cares and loves his uncle, Hector, but at the same time, his sort of natural, abrasive, and angry and sort of hair trigger personality is just magnified to the nth degree when he's using methamphetamine. I mean, that is just a horrible combination in respect to his just outburst and his propensity for violence and aggression, which we see where whenever Hector is upset and this upsets Tuco, we initially see his initial reaction being this just sort of visceral anger, where he's saying, "What do you want? Why are you bothering me?" Essentially, I'm butchering the dialogue there, paraphrasing a little bit, but following that initial sort of abrasive interaction he has with his uncle, the sort of more soft side approach of why he loves his uncle so much is really displayed to us over the course of this episode, where he truly, again, I definitely remember it was definitely either Peter Gould or Vince Gilligan who talked about it, the sort of Salamanca dynamic where they are absolutely ruthless, cold-blooded killers. But as Hector says to the cousins when they're very young, La Familia es todo, it's a very sort of very weird. I mean, there's probably a better word to describe it for sure at Henry. But yeah, it's a very peculiar dynamic, this sort of Salamanca relationship at Henry Lemoyne, where there's just sort of the, very demonstrative, very violent and angry, but at the same time, there's this very sort of unique love that they really have among one another, and it's very sort of, the parallel and the juxtaposition of this ruthless, cold-blooded, psychopathic killer in Tuco with this true love that he shows to his Uncle Hector is really something that I've just thought about it again and again and again as I've seen this episode, where this character does die here a very violent, brutal death, and you can really understand why Walt and Jesse did what they did, but it really sort of humanizes him in a very peculiar way where even ruthless killers like Tuco still love and have affection for family members and things of that effect. And actually, I have some thoughts in respect to how Hector ended up in that house as well, in respect to the sort of open-ended nature of how his storyline ended in Better Call Saul, as opposed to when it picks up here for the very first time in the plot of Breaking Bad, because we have to remember, this is the very first appearance of Hector Salamanca here in the universe of Breaking Bad. So definitely something to think about for sure. But yeah, I actually didn't really think about that for sure in respect to you put him in a really nice crib in the country, and it is kind of a rundown shack without central air. That is a fair point there at Henry Lemoyne, and it is quite ironic and pretty funny, as your emojis indicate for sure. And thank you again so much for the support. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about that at the end of this, or later down the line in this episode for sure, in respect to my sort of thoughts after having a couple months to think about how Hector ended up in this shack when the very last time we saw him in the plot of Better Call Saul. Well, it was technically at Don Eladio's hacienda, but he's living still at Casa Tranquila, and having some thoughts on how he ended up there for sure. At the Recovery 716, Hank was the MVP of this episode. I didn't see that coming. Yeah, definitely not the first time. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, as soon as he calls Gomi and asks for that low jack, if his Monte Carlo has low jack, because that's a detection device, the same device that was used to ping the El Camino in the El Camino movie. And that's when, Joe from the junkyard was about to haul the El Camino back to his junkyard and dispose of it. But of course, the low jack is activated, and that's why he totally FOs off of Skinny Pete's property. So kind of a cool full circle, if you will, in respect to El Camino incorporating this sort of low jack navigation, I guess, system. I guess a detection. It's an anti-theft apparatus, if I'm not 100% mistaken there. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a car guy. I am. I find them pretty cool and interesting, but I don't know them very well, unfortunately. But yeah, the sort of low jack at the Recovery 716. So with the benefit of hindsight, when that was revealed to us when he calls up Gomi after visiting Jesse's mom, with the benefit of hindsight, we probably should have known that Hank was going to go right to that car on the New Mexico border. So yeah, cold opening scene here. Like I said, some real rock and hard place vibes, showing us what happens at the end of the episode at the very beginning. Pretty brief cold opening scene in the grand scheme of things. And then this scene here, what is up at Sam Fisher, picks up at the DEA headquarters here at the U.S. Federal Building. And before I get into the scene here, 1 second. So yeah, before I get into this scene here, in the sort of grand scheme of things here, without trying to get into every little detail, we see Hank leading a DEA meeting, sort of displaying to us that there's a manhunt underway for Tuco Salamanca. At Sam Fisher, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate the support. What do you think would happen if Nacho and Lalo were in a 1 versus 1? Is that like a fist fight at Sam Fisher? I'm sorry if I'm totally blanking on a 1v1 there. Are you saying like if they fought each other? I'm not too completely familiar with that the 1v1. If that's sort of what you're alluding to there. So before I sort of a gunfight fist fight. Okay. I would probably have to give it to Lalo if I'm not mistaken. I mean, with Vince Gilligan sort of saying that Lalo Salamanca is a super genius, gunfight or fist fight. Yeah, I think I'd have to give it to Lalo, with Lalo just being sort of a super villain genius, if you will. I sort of think back to his unbelievable athleticism and vertical jumping ability. For example, when he kills Fred Whalen in the Travel Wire in the season 4 finale, in the episode entitled "Winner," and also thinking about when he jumps down into the ravine where the ditch which the Suzuki Esteem was pushed into by Mike and Jimmy in the episode entitled "Bagman." So yeah, I think I'd have to give it to Lalo, especially with him sort of being the sort of super genius on the sort of same plane as Gus and Walter White, according to Vince Gilligan. I mean, I hope you weren't hoping that I would take Nacho here for some sort of sentimental or emotional reasons or something to that effect. In respect to the fact that Nacho is such a noble, virtuous character in so many respects. I mean, yes, he was a cold-blooded killer, an accessory to murder, did a lot of not very good things when he teamed up with the cartel. But, you know, at the end of the day, he had a very good heart. Maybe even a better heart than Jesse Pinkman, in my humble opinion. But yeah, and just in respect to Lalo being sort of a super villain-esque character, I think I'd have to go with Lalo at Sam Fisher. I don't know if you would, what do you say here? I think Nacho is very crafty, so maybe he would win. But yeah, Lalo 7 out of 10 would win. Yeah, I mean, after just reading that interview in respect to how if Lalo had gotten the best of Gus Fring, then maybe Lalo would have bested Walter White in an alternate universe, in an alternate multiverse of Breaking Bad, where, you know, Lalo could have emerged on top in the same way that maybe Gus Fring could have emerged on top, when at the end of the day it was Walter White who happened to emerge victorious. I think I'd have to lean Lalo there. Lalo is kind of a super genius villain there. And, I mean, if he can somehow finagle his way out of a near-death situation when he was fighting Casper in Axe and Grind, I think I'd have to lean Lalo there, man, as much as I like Nacho. A lot more than I like Jesse Pinkman, as my opinions are not that hidden in any respect. But yeah, have to go with Lalo there, and thank you so much for the support, man. Definitely a fun sort of counterfactual there for sure. At Cod Lover 93 Love, have I seen House of the Dragon? No, I have not. I have not seen House of the Dragon. Not seen Game of Thrones either. I'm not the biggest sci-fi fantasy fan. But yeah, so getting into the scene here, the very first scene in Act 1 is a DEA meeting. Hank Schrader is basically laying out the manhunt that's underway for Tuco Salamanca, just based on all of the backstory that we as the audience saw over the course of Season 1 and the first episode of Season 2. And again, we all saw the episode. I don't want to repeat every single little piece of dialogue here in respect to this scene. Of course, at the end, we see Hank saying, all right, let's get this guy, the great sort of hell yeah chant, which he's followed by Gomi. And of course, following that, you know, him kind of saying, you know, we're never going to get him. He's way down in Mexico by now. Appearances Gomi. And of course, after this, Hank Schrader then recuses himself because he informs Gomez that Walt has gone missing, as we saw the end of the previous episode in respect to his cancer diagnosis and how he just, you know, completely left the house and Skylar's worried sick, and Gomez is kind of saying you don't think that he's, you know, dead. And, you know, basically Hank's, you know, just not wanting to say that it's a possibility but shrugging his shoulders, and Gomez saying, all right, well, you know, keep me apprised of the situation, thus sort of ending the first scene here of Act 1. But unfortunately, and I hate to do this, I'm going to kind of nitpick a very specific piece of dialogue here in this scene. And it has to do with Hank Schrader talking about Tuco Salamanca and him might having cartel connections. And let me just try to find the scene here real quick. and maybe even try to play it if I can cover up my screen somehow. But let's see here. I might have to sort of move this, make this bigger. I know you can see my now you can see my big ugly face. You're welcome. But hopefully I'm covering up most of the screen here for copyright purposes. But maybe even move this over here a little bit. There we go. Just for the moment, I apologize for the huge face you're seeing right now. But there's a great scene here where Hank's sort of giving us the background of Tuco Salamanca, and he says a very important piece of dialogue here in respect to the linear backstory of the plot of Better Call Saul, where I believe he says that Tuco might have cartel connections, instead of just saying he absolutely outright 100% definitively has cartel connections. We are the DEA based in Albuquerque. We would absolutely know this. Let me see if I can sort of find this scene here, if I can turn on the subtitles as well. SoCal biker gangs. And yeah, he even says a very sort of interesting piece of dialogue here in respect to let's see if I can get it. Let's see if I can again, I talked about the sort of Dog Paulson aspect of this as well in a previous video. I don't want to sort of go into that, the sort of connection to the Nacho Vargas story in Gloves Off of Season 2, but he just, let's see if I can get away with playing this without sort of my stream getting taken down and being demonetized. Let's see if we can get away with this. I'll even turn the volume down here. I hope my ugly face is covering up the screen. I think I can get away with playing the audio, but I don't think I can show the video here. So, all right, let's go. Let's see if this works.
I'd say he is a prime suspect in the disappearance of our dearly missed Crazy 8. Hats over your heart for that dirtball.
We hold Tuco in for questioning on that one.
All right, so, and again, that's one sort of interesting point right there where they would know, I guess that really isn't too big of a plot hole there, where even though Crazy 8 was brought in as their confidential informant, I don't think it was ever revealed to us that he had direct cartel connections, and I don't know if the sort of connection between him and Lalo Salamanca was ever, it definitely was never displayed to us in the plot of Better Call Saul, and I definitely think it's very feasible in respect to, even though he was the CI the entire time for the next 4 years until his death in the plot of Breaking Bad, I definitely think it's possible that the Lalo Salamanca connection to Crazy 8 never stuck in the DEA. I guess that's technically possible, but there is a sort of piece of dialogue here where Hank Schrader says that he might have cartel connections. Let me see if I can play this here.
A tight ship, smug bastard. And even worse, El Paso says he's got some kind of cartel connection.
All right, so El Paso says he's got some kind of cartel connection. That's the piece of dialogue right there. So I suppose it's possible that for some reason the local Albuquerque DEA, which Hank Schrader is sort of in charge of, well, I guess he's not in charge of because ASAC Merker's technically in charge, but they aren't 100%, they don't 100% know for certain that Tuco has cartel connections. But again, the very long-winded point I'm trying to sort of make here, I don't know if people could hear that audio or not, but we know from Better Call Saul during this scene here from Rock and Hard Place to talk about how I sort of thought this episode, the cold opening scene related to that, we see here that Suzanne Erickson says that Jimmy represented, indirectly represented Lalo Salamanca and Tuco Salamanca, and she says outright here that both of them have cartel connections. So the Albuquerque DA office knows that Tuco has cartel connections. The El Paso DEA knows that Tuco has cartel connections, but I don't know why Hank, I mean, maybe I'm sort of arguing over semantics in respect to the dialogue here, but maybe for some reason he didn't outright say that the DEA in New Mexico knew that he had cartel connections, even though just based on everything that we saw over the course of Better Call Saul, it would absolutely be confirmed that Tuco Salamanca, with the gravitas of the Salamanca name being related to Lalo Salamanca, and you would imagine that, this information would have been also kicked to the DEA as well. For example, when the Southwest and Anilin robbery in the previous episode was kicked over to the DEA because they thought it may have sort of drug connections. So again, obviously when this episode was displayed to us and written, the entire backstory of the Salamanca and the cartel and Gus Fring had not even been conceived yet, possibly. So again, am I sort of nitpicking here in respect to the dialogue? Probably so, where he says, El Paso says he has some kind of cartel connection. But I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, I'm sort of thinking about it here. I guess it's possible that Tuco was never on Hank Schrader's radar for some reason, even though he was based in Albuquerque and he was locked up. I suppose for the the battery, it was for battery. If we remember back to the episode entitled "Gloves Off," it wasn't for any sort of drug trafficking charge. So I'm kind of sort of correcting myself here in my head as I sort of just rewatched this episode not too long before the stream. But yeah, I guess that's not too big of a plot hole. Actually, I guess I was sort of nitpicking there. I don't know what other people's thoughts are for sure, but and even here with Oakley sort of saying to Saul about how you let some sort of cartel scumbag back on the street. The DA's office absolutely knows about the Salamanca name and the cartel connection. So, yeah, at Justin Cruz, Hank wasn't a prime suspect to Hank, or Tuco wasn't a prime suspect to Hank. I guess just Tuco wasn't on Hank Schrader's radar is the point I'm trying to get at here. I guess that's sort of what I'm coming up to here. So, yeah, I guess at the end of the day, I was nitpicking for no reason, and I'd have to say that, it's not that really big of a plot hole, I suppose. I guess, maybe Hank isn't familiar with the Salamanca name at all. I mean, he does say Salamanca again and again and again. And I don't know, maybe the fact that just Tuco was in jail for so long and that Lalo died all the way back in 2004, based on the official story, of course, to this day, the official story is that he burned to death in his hacienda in Mexico. The police and of course, the police is eventually it is eventually revealed to us that that Lalo Salamanca died when Kim gives her affidavit to the Albuquerque District Attorney's Office in respect to her spilling her guts as it pertained to her involvement with the death of Howard Hamlin and how Lalo Salamanca was caught up in that. But at this moment in time, the official story in the sort of official capacity is that Lalo died in 2004 in Mexico, and Tuco was in prison for battery, I suppose. So I guess I sort of convinced myself otherwise, and I was sort of nitpicking here for no reason. So yeah, I don't know. I guess, yeah. So now I don't have to worry about this anymore, I suppose. So yeah, there you go. I guess it isn't that big of a plot hole in the grand scheme of things. I thought it sort of was with my sort of initial listen to this dialogue for the first time in a while, but after listening to it, it's not that big of a deal. So yeah, that's pretty great in my opinion. And I'm not actually sure. Could people hear that audio when I played it? I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't trying to show the video there, but could people hear that audio? I think you probably could. But before I move, I mean, I don't even know if I want to show this here. But before I move on here, there is a pretty hilarious scene that I just want to play really quick. I apologize for this. This is my sort of 12-year-old humor here, but don't ask me how I stumbled on this. But I was checking out this sort of Spanish audio dub of Breaking Bad here, and I have to say that this is actually pretty hilarious here. If anyone remembers the scene here where Hank is trying to give a pump-up speech to his crew here about get a raging hard-on to find Tuco Salamanca. The Spanish audio dub is absolutely hilarious here, and I have to play it really quick. Of course, I don't think I can show the video, but I will play the audio real quick, and I definitely recommend you go listen to this for sure. But the Spanish language dub here, if this works, is pretty hilarious. So let me see if I can get away with this real quick.
Y experimenten una enorme erección ante la idea de atrapar esta basura.
I don't know why. I don't know why I found that so funny. Maybe it's because I'm 12 years old, but man, there was no euphemism there. There was no idiom. Raging hard-on translated to enorme erección in Spanish. I could hear it not nitpicking. LOL. Again, I don't know, for any Spanish speakers out there, if you know any idioms for raging hard-on, I guess you can inform me. But again, that's neither here nor there, and maybe I don't know why I let my mind wander to that place. But I found that absolutely hilarious. What is that at Woofler? If I apologize if I mispronounced that name. I could hear it not nitpicking. Kate Valentine, I appreciate it. Muy bien, Anton. Yeah, I mean, I found that hilarious. I mean, even the sort of the voice actor there really got into it. I mean, even more so than Hank when he said, get a raging hard-on. It wasn't nowhere near enorme erección, which is the passion that voiceover artist said. But anyway, moving on. I had to play that. But anyway, so moving on here. Scene 2 of Act 1, we then pick up with Hank Schrader doing exactly as he said, going to Walter White's house to sort of investigate on the disappearance of his brother-in-law. Of course, we get the first appearance of Detective Tim Roberts here, who, of course, will appear in the plot of Better Call Saul, including in Season 5, during the scene when Lalo Salamanca is eventually arrested. I believe, oh my goodness, the episode title is escaping me in Season 5. Oh my goodness, the episode title is escaping me. It was the one prior to JMM. It might have been, it was Wexler v. Goodman, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, great scene here where we see Skyler talking with Tim Roberts, essentially filing a missing persons report here, where more information is revealed to us. All the sort of, again, I don't want to re-explain all the details that were displayed to us. We all know what happened. It's basically explaining, sort of setting the scene for the characters who weren't in the room when we were, as the audience, viewing everything that happened over the last few episodes. Skyler's giving all the information surrounding his disappearance, on top of asking about if the sort of cell phone call that he got right before he left the house was run by the police. Of course, when Tim asked Hank about it, Hank says he's looking into it. Of course, he knows the answer to this, and he knows that due to the fact that there's no record of the cell phone, there are some serious insinuations and implications of Walt having a second cell phone that he's not ready to bring up in front of Skyler right now. Primarily likely due to the first prime sort of place your mind goes is infidelity in respect to a, husband and wife and having a secret second cell phone. Great sort of scene here where we see sort of Skyler trying to keep calm despite everything, basically her entire world collapsing around her. And again, I know I've seen a lot of people talk about how they're not the biggest fans of Skyler and they find Skyler even quote unquote annoying, but again, I kind of have to defend her character in this respect, where I definitely don't find her annoying, and I don't hate her by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know if I'm the biggest, I don't know if she's my favorite character, but I definitely don't hate her by any stretch of the imagination. I'm kind of much more neutral on Skyler, and I feel like we have to remember, Skyler is 8 months pregnant right now. I mean, you can only imagine just the hormones that are coursing through a pregnant woman's body at this point in time, not to mention that her husband has been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, her son has, a physical disability that will require lots of money to treat, very likely. They're having another kid on the way. They are very financially unstable in their financial well-being. So I can definitely understand Skyler's reactions here. And some people find it annoying, but again, with just the benefit of context here, I can definitely understand. It makes a lot of sense to me why Skyler is acting out in this manner. I think we just have to remember the context of what's going on right here. How this is a almost 9-month pregnant woman whose husband is diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, who has a son who has a lot of physical ailments, who has another baby coming on the way, who again has no financial security whatsoever. I totally understand her acting in the way that she does, even when she's sort of very upset with Walt following his fugue state, which she doesn't buy into at all. Of course, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here in the next episode. But yeah, sort of great scene here, sort of setting up to us the information that I talked about a little bit earlier in respect to Hank sort of telling Tim about how there's no record, and this means that there was a second cell phone. Of course, foreshadowing a huge piece of the plot here that will be displayed to us over the course of Season 2, thus sort of ending the first act here in this episode. And of course, then following this, we get to the real meat and potatoes aspect of this episode here, which picks up with Tuco Salamanca in the New Mexico sort of wilderness, out in the country here, in the sort of boonies of New Mexico. We see him apparently throwing Walt and Jesse's cell phones into the distance, taking the batteries out and absolutely chucking them. I always wondered if the police would ever stumble upon them, but I don't know. I guess it's technically possible, but I always kind of wondered if they would ever have found those cell phones out in the desert, and whether or not they'd even be looking for cell phones way out into the distance, and with something like that, even sort of putting 2 and 2 together and realizing that one of these was actually Walt's phone. Again, I think he threw 3 cell phones here, both of Walt's phone and Jesse's phone, if I'm not mistaken. And I guess if they ever did put that battery in that phone and they saw the sort of context of what's the word I'm looking for? The contacts on Walter White's phone, I guess they could say, hey, this is Walter White's phone. What the hell is this doing way the hell out here? But again, I sort of digress in respect to these potential plot holes. I feel like I already tried to sort of break down the opening scene here, and I feel like, at the end of the day, the show is pretty damn consistent in returns to the timeline. Yes, there's a few instances here. There are a few instances here and there, but in the grand scheme of things, they tried really hard to adhere to the timeline as strictly as possible. Kaylee Ehrmantraut's age notwithstanding. But anyway, great scene here with Walt and Jesse in the trunk, just sort of waiting their fates. Walt then hallucinates here when Tuco opens up the trunk, sort of seeing his wife Skylar saying, "I forgive you." I can definitely imagine the thoughts that are coursing through Walter White's mind here at this point in time. Just the thinking about all the actions that he has undertaken over the last few months and how all of that, every single sort of choice, and it really sort of makes me think of that Bad Choice Road speech that Mike gave to Saul, where, all of his decisions put him on a road, and that road led him and Jesse Pinkman to being kidnapped in the trunk of Jesse Pinkman, his former high school chemistry students, a trunk of his Monte Carlo by this cartel killer. And this is the situation which he finds himself in right now. His bad choice road has led him to this situation right here, right now. And I can definitely understand why these thoughts are likely coursing through his mind here as he's sort of waiting his fate. He, of course, hallucinates and thinks that Skylar is opening up the trunk here when it's really Tuco. I mean, pretty hilarious scene. I mean, if I can sort of get a shot of, it'll be hard to find a shot of Walt's face here. Again, I probably should mute this. Trying to... pretty great shot here with Walt sort of hallucinating, and then him finally coming to realize that it's not actually Skylar, but it's Tuco that grabs him instead. Quite the realization for Walt here in the scene. Again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but for such a dark show, so many comedic elements that are still intertwined here. And again, even though I've seen this episode 30 times, I can't believe how much I found myself laughing and finding the same sort of elements of this episode unbelievably humorous, the sort of comedic aspects intertwined in this incredibly dark story. It's just absolutely unbelievable. Yeah, Justin Cruz, I will get to that great scene for sure with the chili powder. At Sam Fisher, this and season 1 are the only special effects where things are not as they seem. The other examples are the Mormon bikers. Yeah, I mean, I definitely was sort of reading a little bit about methamphetamine and how it can cause you to sort of have irrational thoughts. And while I don't think it actually makes you hallucinate, like I've talked about in the past, I really don't know how else they would sort of display that to us using the visual medium that is television. Sort of Jesse Pinkman's hallucinations, and while you don't actually hallucinate like that, him thinking that those sort of bikers are posing much more danger than they actually do, definitely seems like a plausible side effect to high use of methamphetamine, which Jesse absolutely does over the course of Breaking Bad. But yeah, great scene here with Walt's hallucinations, just based on his dehydration, sort of makes a little bit more sense to me, where he would, hallucinate that it's Skylar instead of Tuco. I definitely think that's more plausible in respect to disorientation and dehydration, but I digress. Great scene here where he and Jesse are unceremoniously thrown out of the trunk of the car. We see a lot of vibrato by Jesse saying, shoot me in here. I hope I bleed like a mother effer, because then you have to clean it up. Of course, this vibrato is immediately stopped in its tracks when Tuco opens up the trunk again and points the gun at him, basically saying it's your ride. I'm not cleaning up Jack. Of course, following this, we then see Tuco point the gun at Walt and Jesse here. Walt kind of saying, Tuco, don't do this. Them thinking that Tuco's going to kill them right here and right now. But of course, it's then revealed to us that Tuco says, go in the house. Pretty funny scene here where Tuco kicks Jesse while he's down, figuratively, but kicks him in the back. And it's kind of crazy just to see how little that Tuco respects Jesse here over the course of this episode. How he really views him as just a total, I don't even know what the word is, but just a total sort of, subhuman person, which doesn't even earn a modicum of his respect. Just laughing at him, putting him down, telling him to shut up, even displaying to him much more disrespect than he displays to Walter White. Again, there's sort of an odd, level of respect here that Tuco displays to Walt. Maybe it has something to do with just, the fact that he's older. And it is kind of interesting. I mean, I'm going off on a crazy tangent here, but you wonder if everything that happened with Mike and sort of, maybe him saying I should respect my elders more or something to that effect, and the sort of maybe the life lesson that was maybe hammered into him. I mean, maybe I'm giving Tuco a little bit too much credit here. Could just be that he respects him for sort of, having balls, as he said in the episode where he blows up his compound with the fulminated mercury. And of course, he sees Jesse as this sort of, timid sort of guy, weakness to be exploited. So yeah, just kind of an interesting component here in this scene. And of course, before we get back to the sort of main story here, we get a little montage scene of Marie and Skylar hanging up posters. Of course, a very important plot detail that needed to be displayed to us. Of course, the big sort of major sort of BC story that's happening here is that Marie is trying to sort of bury the hatchet in respect to the shoplifting of the tiara. But of course, Skylar says, Marie, this is not the time or the place. Of course, that conversation will finally come ahead, I believe, in the episode entitled Breakage, during the cookout, where Marie will finally sort of come to terms with her shoplifting and how she treated her sister. But again, that's a little bit further down the road here. That's kind of the B story that's not as sort of interesting and consequential as the main A story. Of course, as Skylar's sister Marie, Walt Jr. is back at the house, printing out more posters. We then see a pretty awesome piece of foreshadowing here of the diaper box with Walter White's drug money and Jesse Pinkman's gun, which he left in the box prior to him getting kidnapped by Tuco. And then, of course, we get back to the A story here, back in the house in the country with the very first appearance ever of Hector Salamanca. Kate Valentine, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate the support. The comic relief definitely comes from Bryan Cranston's character, Hal from Malcolm in the Middle. Kate Valentine, I could not agree with you more. I definitely often think back, and thank you again so much for the super chat. I appreciate the emoji as well, and all the support you've given to this channel. But I often think back to that interview that Vince Gilligan gave. Again, I'm not exactly sure where it was, but he talked about why he wanted Bryan Cranston specifically for this role, where he wanted someone who could be this very sort of intimidating figure, be the Heisenberg character, but could also be the Mr. Chips, which Bryan Cranston absolutely was when he was Hal Wilkerson from Malcolm in the Middle. And of course, there is that infamous episode in X-Files where Bryan Cranston plays the sort of bad guy in that character. He plays the bad guy character in that episode where it is, again, I haven't seen the X-Files, but I have seen a little bit of that scene. I don't really know what's going on in the scene because I haven't seen the entire episode. But if you just go back and watch that scene, you can really see a little bit of Heisenberg come out from a younger Bryan Cranston. And that episode specifically is apparently what made Vince Gilligan want Bryan Cranston as opposed to Matthew Broderick or John Cusack to play Walter White. And of course, with the benefit of hindsight, I mean, there's no one else in this universe at Kate Valentine who you could ever imagine playing the main character in Breaking Bad other than Bryan Cranston. It's unfathomable, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, I love Malcolm in the Middle. It's an absolutely hilarious show. And yeah, a lot of the sort of, maybe the sort of little sort of idiosyncrasies of comedic acting definitely permeate very significantly when Bryan Cranston is the one who's playing this very dangerous character, but at the same time, all of the comedic aspects also come through. I would agree completely. And yeah, again, I'll never sort of, it was either Walter White or Vince Gilligan said this, but apparently, again, don't quote me on this, but, the AMC executives sort of, thinking to themselves when it was pitched to them that Vince Gilligan wanted Bryan Cranston to play this drug dealer that would be created in this Breaking Bad universe, sort of saying, you want the goofy dad from Malcolm in the Middle to play this role? But at Kate Valentine, like you're saying, I mean, it's just, it works so well because when Walter White, even down in season 5 of Breaking Bad, when Walt is sort of talking with Hank in the episode Blood Money, the part part 2 of season 5 premiere when Walt is being sort of very cordial and happy, and oh hey Hank, I hope you're doing much better, and he's very sort of lighthearted, and he's very approachable, and he's very what's the word I'm looking for here? He's very trustworthy. So the dynamic works absolutely perfectly, where Walt is sort of this Jekyll and Hyde, where he's this ruthless, cold-blooded Heisenberg, but at the same time, he's also the sort of Mr. Chips character when he has to be. He can really sort of turn it off. And it is kind of interesting. I don't know if any people have ever seen the sort of behind-the-scenes filming of Breaking Bad, but Bryan Cranston is definitely not a method actor, and he definitely goes in and out of character, and he's always smoking and joking and cracking jokes in between takes, where he's not staying in character as Walter White. So yeah, I mean, there's no right way to be an actor. I mean, don't quote me, I know nothing about it, but I know a lot of people are method actors, but Bryan Cranston is absolutely not. But yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable how funny this show is, despite the fact of how incredibly dark it is at the exact same time at Kate Valentine. And yeah, I think about that again and again. And yeah, I really appreciate the support you've given to this channel. Thank you so much. But yeah, I mean, that scene, I mean, I'm sort of skipping ahead of myself here, but we will get to the scene when Jesse Pinkman says chili powder. That look on Walter White's face, where you have got to be effing kidding me. And then of course it comes to blows a little bit later in this episode, where he says chili powder. Did I not tell you how moronic that is? How that is based in nothing. There is no sort of anything. There's no logical, rational reason in the manufacturing of methamphetamine from a pure chemistry perspective where you would adulterate it with chili powder. Just the look on his face is just absolutely hilarious. And yes, at Sam Fisher, a Wire in 4 Days Out this season as well. A lot of great comedic scenes for sure. At Hine, I often think Walt and Jesse were the Hal and Malcolm of the future. Yeah, I mean, there's so many great memes out there at Hine of how Better Call Saul, how Malcolm in the Middle is is it either the prequel, is a prequel to Breaking Bad? I've seen those memes for sure. That's pretty hilarious. Yeah, Stone Yoda, you should be acting all sacrificial, jumping on a grenade. I mean, that scene where Walt repeats back to Jesse, hit him over the head with something and picks up the fly swatter. I mean, still hilarious to this day. I mean, never gets old. Yeah, at the Pattern Slice 9900, I think, yeah, Vince Gilligan did work on the X-Files, and I definitely think they did work together, and that's how the initial relationship started at the Pattern Slice 9900, if I'm not mistaken. So, at Justin Cruz, my phone died. Anthony, did you read my comment where I said Jesse shouldn't have told Tuco he made the crystal meth with chili powder, so him and Walt could have poisoned Tuco with the rice? Yeah, I mean, of course, in hindsight, that was just, he tried, and Jesse's sort of vibrato and his ego sort of made him go to that very moronic place, which, of course, ended up being the absolute backbreaker. But yeah, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, he absolutely shouldn't have said the chili powder thing, and they would have had that ace up their sleeve had they not done that. And Walt was just kind of sitting there letting Jesse roll with it, and of course it really came back to bite them for sure. Yeah, at Hine, that definitely sort of rings a bell. I've seen all the various sort of scenes that are cut up in the memes for Better Call Saul. I keep saying Better Call Saul. Malcolm in the Middle and Breaking Bad. That's Sam Fisher. More great. What the hell is wrong with you? Why are you blue? So many great quotes this season. So many great quotes. All great season 2 quotes. But yeah, I mean, sort of getting back into it here, and I have some more thoughts in respect to the Hector Salamanca aspect in the scene. But of course, just to set the stage here a little bit, following Tuco making sure that Walt and Jesse don't die of dehydration, it's then revealed to us, following them emptying their pockets, and of course, again, a lot of crucial details here. Almost too many details to discuss, but great scene here when Tuco says, "I thought your name was Heisenberg." but your name is Walter Hartwell White. I always wondered how Hector, well, I mean, not always wondered, I mean, it's kind of revealed to us right here, but I initially wondered when the cousins visited Hector at Casa Tranquila, where he wrote out on the Ouija board Walter White, how Hector knew Walter White's real name, but of course Tuco says it right in front of him right here, where he says, I thought your name was Heisenberg, Walter Hartwell White. So again, it was, we have to remember that Hector is completely lucid, though he cannot communicate. His brain is essentially completely intact. He's completely lucid in there, as per Gus Fring's plan to sort of keep him alive in the sort of captive state he was in. But of course, his brain is totally working, and he would have been able to retain that information. So he says Walter's name right in front of Hector here. So definitely displays to us how Hector knew that. Of course, we see the real sort of anger come through here when Tuco essentially threatens his family, saying, I love working with a family man. A lot of collateral. Of course, more sort of being dismissive here and making fun of Jesse pulling the Trojan out of his wallet. Totally, again, showing absolutely no respect to Jesse whatsoever. Just seeing his weakness, trying to exploit it. Textbook sort of someone who is trying to, I guess, textbook, prey. I don't know, sort of Tuco being sort of an apex predator, if you will, and sort of seeing Jesse as a sort of, lame sort of gazelle or something to that effect. I feel like I didn't do a great job explaining that, but again, yeah, Tuco just no respect for Jesse. Again, plans to kill him here in this scene if it's not for Walter White's intervening, but yeah, we'll get to that for sure. At Sam Fisher, thank you so much again for the super chat. Really appreciate the support. Which Salamanca do you think had the best shirts? Oh man, that is quite the question there. I mean, they were all very snazzy dressers there in respect to those very sort of opulent, flashy shirts. I mean, they all had great shirts. It was definitely the sort of Salamanca taste. I mean, they're very sort of shiny, flashy shirts. I feel like Tuco's were maybe the most ornate and intricate with his designs. I feel like maybe Lalo's were sort of a little bit more subtle. They were very flashy and shiny, but not as sort of loud, as the kids say. Very loud shirts worn by Tuco Salamanca here. And of course, the cousins, Marco and Leonel, they always just wore kind of, I think there were a couple scenes where they maybe wore non-solid colors, but again, very sort of high-quality shirts, but they dressed a lot more clean, and I feel like they were sort of the least loud. Tuco being the loudest and Lalo sort of being in the middle. But yeah, they were all very snazzy dressers. Is that the word? Snappy dressers. Again, I don't really know much about fashion. No real fashion sense for me. But yeah, definitely sort of noticed the shirts was definitely intentional by the creators here when displaying to us these characters on screen. For sure, at Sam Fisher. That's Stone Yoda. That's a good way to put it. That is not a bad way to put it. At Hine, Lalo was a sociopath, but he nevertheless wore it better. Again, to each their own. They all wore very sort of vibrant shirts. That definitely seemed like a sort of flashy cartel thing for sure. And yeah, at Animated Alex, imagine if the twins had shown up earlier. Yeah, it's something that I was talking about over the course of Season 6 of Better Call Saul, how my fingers were crossed, how we would at some point in time see a scene of the cousins together outside of the two cousins, Marco and Leonel. But yeah, we never saw Tuco interact with any of his cousins on screen, or Lalo, or the cousins. They never had a scene together on screen. It was absolutely revealed to us that they communicated with one another, but yeah, never got to see them together. Kind of, you could only imagine Tuco and Lalo interacting. Like I talked about how they're absolute sort of sociopaths, but in completely different ways. I mean, with Lalo sort of being more your kind of, serial killer sociopath, where initially he seems very trustworthy and, very, very trustworthy and someone who you can let your guard down with, but then, of course, will absolutely manipulate you and be a ruthless killer. Tuco, no bones about it. He is sort of a ruthless, in-your-face, hardened, screaming killer. And, of course, the cousins are more sort of you definitely know they're ominous, but they're much more subtle than Tuco. So their personalities are all so different. But, yeah, it would have been pretty great to see them all together, but alas, no cigar, unfortunately. Yeah, definitely Justin Cruz. The colors are definitely important in Breaking Bad, for sure. That's a whole nother thing. I could go off on a whole thing about that. But yeah, the colors are definitely intentional and important. And yeah, at Animated Alex, or yeah, you kind of allude to the sort of relationship here. But yeah, um, sort of getting into it here. Great scene right here with sort of Tuco going up to Walter White saying, "Can I trust you?" And I don't know about you guys, but I definitely got serious Tuco Salamanca lie detector vibes, where we have to remember when again, it's amazing how the show comes full circle, but that scene when Nacho's kind of giving some backstory about Tuco to Mike, and he talks about the dog Paulson reference, which of course is also referenced in this episode. I made an entire video about that as well. You can check that out if you want. But he kind of says that Tuco has this lie detector test, and he's definitely doing it again right here, where the dialogue that's written in the Better Call Saul with Tuco and his lie detector that he was giving to Crazy 8 and he also gave to Dog Paulson, he's essentially doing this right here to Walter White, getting up right in his face and looking him in the eye saying, "Can I trust you?" Which is essentially exactly what we saw him do to Crazy 8. Where he basically says, this is his lie detector test that Nacho Varga referred to in Better Call Saul. So again, you do wonder if they sort of saw this scene right here and said, this is Tuco, basically doing a makeshift lie detector, and let's write it into this scene in season 2 of Better Call Saul as Tuco's lie detector. So yeah, just a, great scene here for sure, where Walt says, yes, absolutely. Of course, unfortunately, Tuco's lie detector sort of makeshift test here was not the most accurate, because he definitely shouldn't have trusted Walter White, because they were going to betray them the first chance that they got. Of course, following this, apparently, I mean, what else can Tuco do here? But take Walter White as his word. Again, another unbelievable scene here where it's revealed to us the information that we saw at the very end of the previous episode, where and at the very beginning of this episode, where, of course, just based on the result of, I guess, how do you frame this? But just based on the fact that, as Tuco says to Walt and Jesse here, how the DEA picked up everyone in his crew other than Gonzo, this makes Tuco believe that Gonzo was the DEA informant who turned in his entire crew. Of course, this is much to the surprise of Walt and Jesse, because they know that Gonzo is dead. And of course, once, Tuco basically says, if I ever see him, I'm going to kill him. This is what happens when I'm butchering the dialogue here. And as I was watching this scene, just an unbelievable piece of acting here by Raymond Cruz, the actor who plays Tuco Salamanca. If you just kind of see just this sort of emotional, visceral sort of, anger that he exhibits here in the scene. Just an unbelievable piece of acting. Just to sort of, get this angry and sort of present this sort of emotional response here in the scene is just unbelievable, saying, "You never trust the ones you love. If I ever see Gonzo, I'm going to kill him." And again, I've always thought about this as well, about how we have to remember that it's probably has been at some point in time revealed to Tuco, maybe while he was in prison or after he got out, that Nacho Varga, his former associate, betrayed his cousin, Lalo Salamanca. And he's saying this scene, "You never trust the ones you love," and how Tuco is basically saying, essentially that. And you definitely would think that, I remember when I was watching season 1 of Better Call Saul, and we really see Nacho sort of being a top lieutenant of Tuco, and Tuco listening to Nacho and taking the advice of Nacho. It's very head-scratching at first when you're a Breaking Bad fan, because you're saying, why in the world is Tuco listening to someone else? Tuco doesn't listen to anybody. He totally just sort of grabs the bull by the horns and, killed No-Dos for even opening up his mouth, essentially. And you definitely wonder if that's sort of the fact that he trusted Nacho Varga at one point in his life, and then Nacho ended up betraying his cousin and essentially killing him. That's the official story, if you will, in respect to the cartel. If that sort of sets Tuco off and saying, I can't believe I trusted this guy. I'll never trust anyone ever again. And now it happened to me again, where my own brother-in-law betrayed me. So yeah, just a lot of food for thought here in respect to Tuco's actions. And of course, what's also very interesting about this scene is that despite the official cartel story, and maybe even the story being told to Tuco that Nacho betrayed Lalo, Hector knows that Gus Fring was the one who killed Lalo. And again, there's just so much backstory here where, again, we have to remember it's been about 4 years since all of that happened. No one believes him. They sort of just chalk it up to him being sort of a, an old man with a vendetta who's making things up to try to get back at Gus Fring. But he knows with his own ears that Lalo was still alive and that he was communicating with him. So yeah, just a lot of sort of food for thought here in respect to I'm sounding like a broken record here, but how do you not watch this episode without just sort of thinking about the plot of Better Call Saul? As Peter Gould said, how you see Breaking Bad in an entirely new light after watching Better Call Saul. But yeah, just a lot of food for thought here for sure. Of course, Jesse then saying you're planning to ice Gonzo, like future tense, of course, them realizing that they think that Gonzo is a DEA informant, but of course they know that Gonzo is dead, so Tuco doesn't have the full story here, but of course they're not revealing this information to Tuco because, as they'll say later in this episode, if he ever finds out that Gonzo is alive or is already dead, he would automatically suspect these are the only two loose ends that could have maybe informed to the feds. Of course, following this, Tuco then, of course, saying that, these guys are after me. I'm going crazy here. I need to get good and high. Of course, this is, a plot development scene where, as people already said in the chat, he's about to sort of have the ricin methamphetamine, but of course, after smelling it, it has a sort of, off smell. Of course, this causes him to not snort it right away. Basically saying this gag smells like head cheese. Of course, before he finally attempts to snort it, he then sort of talks about his grand plan that he has about going way out in the jungle in Mexico and sort of creating the super lab where they cook 24/7. A lot of, again, so many different dynamics here in respect to the super lab that eventually exists. Again, I wouldn't imagine that, Hector would ever communicate to Tuco about the sort of lab that Lalo was saying that Gus was building. There's so many what if maybes where we could just go back and forth again. We have no idea what conversations were had with Hector and otherwise. What was told to Tuco in respect to the official cartel story as opposed to Hector trying to confide in Tuco that Lalo was killed at the hands of Gus Fring. We'll never know these conversations. We could speculate it again, and we literally could speculate till the cows come home, no pun intended, with the cow that Tuco will shoot later in this episode. But yeah, just a unbelievable scene here, hilarious scene where Walt basically says, I can't just uproot my life. I have a wife and family. Tuco basically saying, so what? You'll get a new one. So much humor interjected here in the scene. Again, I feel like I'm kind of getting bogged down a little bit here in the plot details, but yes, as people said earlier, this great scene here where Jesse tries to get Tuco to use this ricin methamphetamine by saying it has a secret ingredient. Of course, he keeps building and building, and Tuco wants to get high, and he's about to taste it, but of course, as soon as he says secret ingredient, this is an absolute deal breaker for Tuco, saying he hates chili powder. So, pretty great scene here through and through. I can't do it justice explaining it, but yeah, unbelievable scene. Yes, at Hine, Tuco was absolutely blitzed out of his mind on meth here in this scene, and that definitely sort of explains a lot of his irrational decision making that ultimately leads to his death here in this episode. I'd definitely say that for sure. At Reed's, what is up as well. Loved how Jesse was serious about Walt's obligation to sacrificing himself because of his cancer. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of funny where it is so true where he says, "Is that what you're saying?" He's like, "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying." Pretty great scene there through and through. But yeah, of course, like I said, this I gotta find the shot here of a Walt's face after Jesse says chili pad. This face here with Walt basically can say, "You have got to be effing kidding me with this chili powder," where he was about to take this and you totally effed it up. I mean, this look on Walt's face just gets me to this day. It's absolutely hilarious. Him containing his just rage to himself. Like, I cannot believe this is my partner here, this imbecile who doesn't know what he's doing. But yeah, pretty great scene here through and through. And yeah, unbelievable. And but I always have wondered in respect to there's this great scene here with if I can sort of find the scene here with Tuco putting the again, there's a better close-up shot up here. I was on it a little bit earlier, but Trying to find the shot. I'll never find it again, but here we go. But yeah, so we can see that like Tuco has the meth here on his skin. But I always wonder this because, again, I don't know the intricacies of the lethal poison ricin, but I remember that story that he told to Jesse in the season 1 finale of Breaking Bad in respect to the ricin and how they inserted the ricin into the leg of a Bulgarian journalist, and it was no bigger than the size of the head of a pin. I always did wonder. I know how your skin is very porous and how drugs can be absorbed through the skin. So I don't know if it's the same with ricin about whether or not it needs to be physically in your body and how it can't be absorbed through your skin. But that's something I always wondered about in respect to that ricin being so lethal and how Jesse always had in his pocket. And yes, it was in that vial and, it was in that very sort of thin, wispy bag. And you wonder if it sort of, broke or something to that effect. And, everyone was exposed to the ricin. They all would have died again. At the end of the day, I don't want to nitpick in respect to the sort of the science and the sort of physics and chemistry behind how ricin is administered, but I don't know. It's just something I've always thought about because I definitely know that drugs can be absorbed through your skin. So, at Sam Fisher, thank you so much again for the super chat. What's the story on Tuco's chain? Yeah, I did a video on that, and that's sort of a great question. And of course, we all sort of know that Tuco was wearing that boxing gloves sort of necklace when he was fighting with Mike in the episode entitled Gloves Off. And of course, yeah, I'm trying to find a shot of it here. He's wearing it right here. And of course, we see Mike holding the sort of boxing glove medallion in his hand at the end of at the beginning of that episode, which of course is in reality the end of the episode. A very sort of common trope in respect to cold opening scenes in Breaking Bad. And I made an entire video about how we don't know how we got it back, etc. But I mean, just based on the nature of the story, I just think it makes the most sense that he bought another necklace. I mean, I made an entire video about it in the past. You can definitely go back and check that out if you want. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's kind of the Occam's razor, if you will. The simplest explanation might be the best one. I think he might have just bought another necklace. Maybe it's not even the same one. Maybe it's even more diamond encrusted than the other one. But it makes a lot of sense to me that he could have just gotten a new sort of boxing glove emblem necklace after it was ripped off his neck from Mike. So that's kind of what I'm rolling with in respect to, as opposed to some sort of crazy sort of, 2-season intricate story in respect to how Tuco got that necklace back from Mike. Even though the sort of Salamancas could never find out that Mike was working for Mike was working for Gus, because there's that whole other dynamic in respect to that storyline with the Salamanca names. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm rolling with that, Sam Fisher. But yeah, definitely go and check out that video if you want in respect to Tuco's necklace. And I know a lot of people have talked about that online for sure. And thank you again so much for the support. Really appreciate it. It means a lot. But yeah, great scene here. We're following him not using the ricin meth. He then, snorts the blue magic, the real stuff that he, kind of getting high on his own supply here. Likely part of the blue that was the 4.5 pounds of blue that was sold to him at the end of season 1 of Breaking Bad. Of course, following him doing this bump, he then is totally reinvigorated. His sort of fears and, any sort of reservations he has about his world caving in around him with the DEA are quickly mitigated following him snorting this meth. Him then saying to Jesse, all right, time to clean the manure out from in between yours, basically saying, I don't need you, I only need Walt. But of course, Walt says to him, no, you can't kill him, I need him very badly. If he doesn't go, I don't go. And of course, Tuco then saying, my cousins are going to be here by sundown. They're going to smuggle us to Mexico, and you're going to be on the truck or you're going to be dead. Of course, him then saying to Jesse, and you better hope there's room in the trunk. Thus sort of ending this unbelievable scene here in this episode. I believe it's the last scene in Act 2, if I'm not mistaken, and sort of, really leaving Walt and Jesse in this dire predicament here in the sort of middle of this episode with when the very first time I watched this, really sort of thinking, how in the world are they going to get out of this predicament for sure? But yeah, of course, following this unbelievable scene here, we then pick up with the B story at Justin Cruz. Why would Tuco hate chili powder? He's Mexican. Should he like the spice? LOL. I mean, can't generalize there for sure, right? I mean, to each their own. I guess that's like saying what every American's gonna like hamburgers. I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, I wouldn't say everyone likes chili powder, no matter where you're from. To each their own. I guess I guess he's an individual at Justin Cruz. He's not sort of he's not a monolith. Like all, groups of people aren't monoliths. We're individuals. So why would he like chili? Why would he hate chili? Why would he like chili powder as opposed to hate it? So I don't know. Maybe I don't want to trudge in that minefield, but I see where I didn't really see where you were getting at there when I first started reading that, but pretty funny nonetheless. At Sam Fisher, thank you again so much for the super chat. Really appreciate the support. Would Hank win if the Cousins back up Tuco? Oh, I wouldn't think so. No way. They would definitely be packing at Sam Fisher. Of course, I mean, very lucky for Hank they weren't arriving till sundown, and it was still light out, and it was going to take a while, but no way. I mean, of course, with the grand scheme of things, Hank did end up getting the best of the Cousins, but of course he had the upper hand because he was alerted immediately prior to the ambush that he had 1 minute before the two people were going to come and kill him. So he did have that sort of upper hand, but I feel like if they just showed up unannounced, I don't think Hank's getting out of there in the same way that, him with his Glock and Gomi with his, shotgun were in no way going to outgun the Jack Walker and his crew with their sort of, fully automatic rifles, Kenny's fully automatic AA-12 shotgun. So I mean, I don't care how badass Hank Schrader is. I feel like he's not going to outgun the Cousins. I feel with their firepower, I would imagine they would have been packing, and there's no way I feel like he would have won. No way. I mean, how could you? But again, it's kind of like wrong place at wrong time, or right place at wrong time, if you will. For Hank Schrader. In the same way where, if Mike didn't inform Gus of the hit that was going to happen in the episode entitled Caballo Sin Nombre, Walt would have absolutely been chopped to pieces by the Cousins. There would have been no way he would have gotten out of that situation. But of course, they're sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? The sort of very ceremonious nature of the execution that had to happen. They weren't just going to ambush him. They were literally going to wait for him to get out of the shower and be very sort of, ceremonious and over the top with this execution. But yeah, in the same way, had Mike not called Gus, Walter White would have absolutely been dead. And I love that scene so much. I've talked about it in the past. I'd kind of go off on a tangent if I talked about it. Maybe I'll save it for when I talk about that episode down the road. But yeah, I don't see it, man. There's no way. It just doesn't. The Cousins are just way too OP for Hank to have any way sort of outgunned all three of them, I feel. Especially when he wasn't prepared for the ambush, only had his gun. I think he only had one more clip with him. I don't even know how much more ammunition he had. But yeah, definitely have to give that to Tuco and the Cousins for sure. And thank you again so much for the super chat. That is true at Sam Fisher, but like I said, he had the upper hand. He got the phone call saying, people are coming. You have 1 minute. If it was the other way around and he didn't get the warning, as Gus said to Hector, a warning call was placed to Schrader moments before the attack, giving him the upper hand. So just based on the sort of dialogue and backstory of Breaking Bad, I'd have to give it to the Cousins and Tuco, just in my humble opinion. So. At Francis Ray, Tuco was sloppy, but we have to remember he was pretty keyed up here in this episode as well. So the constant methamphetamine use probably sort of made his sort of decision making very irrational, not very logical at all in respect to sort of making the most coherent, logical decisions based on the sort of actions that were presented to him. It was much more emotional and sort of instinctual and off the cuff. But yeah, I would imagine all of that methamphetamine use at Francis Ray led to his very sloppy sort of behavior here in this episode that absolutely ended up in his ultimate demise. That is for sure at Francis Ray. But yeah, sort of getting back into the B story of this episode here, we then sort of pick up with Walter Jr. going to place more flyers. What's the missing persons flyers? Missing persons flyers all over town. Skylar saying she wants to do it, but of course she's 8 months pregnant. They're saying you haven't slept in forever. Walter Jr. will be fine. Of course, I don't want to get bogged down in the nitty-gritty sort of dialogue here, but of course, the main overarching premise of the scene is the fact that it's finally revealed to us that Walt has that second cell phone. But of course, I mean, unbelievable scene here for sure, where when Marie says, "What about the second cell phone?" And Hank sort of gives Marie that look like, "Are you kidding me? You're bringing this up now?" And of course, the grand sort of, like I talked about earlier in the stream, the insinuation is the fact that, Walt is cheating on Skylar, and Hank doesn't want to sort of come out right out and say this. Pretty hilarious scene here. I can't do it justice without playing it. I mean, you have to go back and watch it. I mean, Marie's dialogue, Hank Schrader's facial reactions, the apple pie Chevrolet. I mean, absolutely hilarious. Of course, it's revealed to us that Walt has the second cell phone. Skylar saying, "So what, he's having an affair?" Marie saying, "Walt, no, not Walt." And of course, this finally then goes back to Marie sort of thinking back, what about the marijuana? This Jesse Pinkman character, you have to question him. We're basically, where the case is sort of run cold here. Hank at the same time saying, "Okay, I can do this," but we're basically grasping at straws. And this is sort of the setup scene to Hank meeting with Jesse Pinkman's mom at Jesse Pinkman's house. And of course, he sort of comes here under sort of false pretenses, I'd say half-truth pretenses, if you will. And, okay, I'll take it. Menudo, is that how you say manure? That's Sam Fisher, the studying the Spanish. All right, I'll take your word for it there for sure. So, oh man, the chat there, that is getting me here. But anyway, he sort of comes under false pretenses saying, "I'm looking for my brother-in-law. He was a teacher of a former student of his was your son, Jesse Pinkman." Of course, the conversation starts out very cordially in respect to how, Jesse's mom sort of was very taken aback by the fact that Walt saw promise in Jesse when no one else did. Of course, her saying, "Sorry to hear about his diagnosis," but of course, it's then very quickly revealed to us that Hank is sort of not there under the pretenses which he said he was there for, and it's revealed to us that he's a DEA agent. And of course, Jesse's mother is very taken aback by this because she knows Jesse has been in trouble before and asking, "Do I need a lawyer? If I'm going to get caught up in all of this?" Of course, Hank's saying, "At this moment in time, I have no reason to believe your son is doing anything wrong." Of course, little did he know that he's fully involved with Walter White at this point in time. But of course, he just says, "I just want to find my brother-in-law any way that you can help. This is really the only lead I have." Of course, her saying that, "I haven't seen my son in months and I don't plan on seeing him in the future." Sort of the case running cold initially, but of course, Hank then saying, does he still drive his Monte Carlo? And, great line here where his mom basically says if he only spent as much time on his, education, time and money on his education as he did on that stupid car, sort of saying, what could have been. And this, of course, being a huge sort of piece of plot development here where Hank, if he realizes it's a low rider, it probably has low jack theft detection, and this being the sort of plot detail which eventually leads him to discovering Jesse Pinkman's car out in the boonies of New Mexico. And yeah, that's a whole nother dynamic. Again, I could go off on just, 2-hour tangents on all these scenes here. But yeah, definitely. And of course, this scene here with the DEA agent swinging by Jesse's mom and dad's house, of course, eventually leads to her going to Jesse's aunt's house and seeing his laboratory in the basement. And this is the pretext by which Jesse is kicked out of his house down the road in season 2. But sort of getting ahead of myself here, I'll talk about that when that scene arises in the episodes to come. But of course, following this, sort of all of the back and forth that I discussed early in this episode is discussed by Jesse and Walt, kind of saying, "Chili powder, did I not tell you how moronic that was?" Great sort of scene here with the cooking, how very Lalo Salamanca-esque this scene. Of course, the very first time we ever see Lalo on screen, he is singing and cooking at the El Michoacan restaurant. Of course, like I said, much more non-threatening than Tuco is here, but kind of a great callback here. Again, so many of the jokes here that were displayed to us in this scene. At Sam Fisher a little bit down the line there in the next scene when he's shooting at the cow. Sort of going over what we just saw here. Of course, following the no-dose and gonzo information being displayed on the television that Hector is watching. Walt then very quickly changes the channel because, as they said, once if Tuco didn't kill Gonzo, then who did? Saying, I don't know, but if he ever finds out that he's already dead, who does he immediately expect? Us. And then, of course, great scene here with the sort of tell where, despite, and again, really sort of genius move here by Hector where, he's definitely playing the long game here and not giving away the fact that he is completely lucid, even though it's sort of a quick reveal to us here. A great shot when he's sort of staring at Walt and Jesse after he changes the channel, sort of displaying to us like, all right, I know what you did here. But of course, when Walt then goes up to him, if I can sort of, try to get this scene here without, again, it's going to be hard to, I don't want to, gotta sort of, it is what it is here with the, man, Walt, again, great scene here where Walt is trying to see if he's absolutely lucid or not. And of course, really genius move here by T.O. Hector Salamanca playing the long game here in respect to him putting on airs that he's sort of almost even like a vegetable here in his wheelchair. But yeah, so again, they're trying to figure out what to do here. Great scene here with the bum rush, which we talked a little bit about a little bit earlier about how you got the C-bomb, you're all checked out, you should be all sacrificial jumping on a grenade and stuff. I mean, great scenes that the chat brought up here in this scene right here. Can't do it justice explaining it. Just got to go back and rewatch it. Of course, Walt just racking his brain saying, how the heck are we going to get out of this situation? We are so effed. How do we get out of this? And, with him just racking his brain, the only logical conclusion he comes up to is that we have to get him to take this ricin. This is the only even infinitesimal way we're going to get out of this situation. At least this is the only sort of path forward that Walt even sees remotely possible, just based on the fact that their backs are completely against the wall here. And it is kind of crazy to think about how, had they had not attempted to poison Tuco here, Tuco, Hector then wouldn't have sort of totally mean mugged them and called out to Tuco using his bell that they were punking him. So effectively, in a sort of like a weird sort of long-winded way, it did end up sort of saving them in the end, but of course not the way they drew it up on the board. But yeah, great scene here where following Hector being told by Tuco that the food is ready, once his back is turned remotely, Walt then puts the sort of ricin meth in the burrito here. He then really folds it up really terribly, and like it looks pretty bad. But I guess by the time that Tuco ends up biting into it, it's all sort of put back together again. Maybe that sort of happens off camera, but my goodness gracious, I don't know about you, but the very first time that I saw this bell ring right before Tuco was about to bite into this burrito, I absolutely lost it the very first time I saw this episode. And I still find it pretty damn funny to this day. I don't know about you guys, but if I can sort of, it's going to be hard to find the exact shot here. Tis the nature. This shot here, this shot and Walt and Jesse's reaction to it, oh my goodness, I lost it. Just like, what a plot twist. I feel like the bell was there in plain sight the entire time, but of course, at the very first watch of this, it's not something that's in your mind, but when Hector, or I guess at this point in time, just T.O., we don't know his name is Hector yet, but when he rings that bell to communicate with Tuco, what a plot twist here. Just, absolutely hilarious. Walt and Jesse's reaction to them sort of overlooking this potential possibility in respect to their plan was just unbelievably hilarious. And yeah, at Brian C. What is up? But yeah, just through and through, absolutely hilarious scene here. My goodness. And so, yeah, again, without getting bogged down in every detail, Hector's trying to warn Tuco about the fact that the burrito is poisoned. As Sonyoda, yep, rice and bean burrito, absolutely. But, yeah, he tries to warn him that it's poisoned, and of course, when he's unable to do so, he then just, of course, with him thinking that he wants Tuco's burrito because it's bigger and maybe it's more food, he, of course, then knocks it off the table. Tuco then, of course, saying, what you do that for? Like I talked about initially, his initial reaction is very angry and visceral and emotional. And, of course, that's likely his personality compounded by his methamphetamine use, but at the same time, he's very worried about Hector saying, what you do that for, Tio? Like, Tio, what's going on? What's the matter here? And yeah, I mean, with the benefit of hindsight here for sure, with that finger point to Walt and Jesse, I got some serious Rock and Hard Place vibes when, Hector was pointing that finger at Gus Fring during the meeting with Juan Bolsa and the cousins when they're getting Nacho to confess. I got some real Better Call Saul vibes there for sure, where he's using his finger to point at these two, saying, like, I know what you did, in the same way that he's pointing at Gus, saying, I know what you did, Gus Fring. So, yeah, Peter Gould spot on in respect to seeing Breaking Bad in an entirely different light. But yeah, absolutely unbelievably hilarious scene here. Very dark, yet very hilarious plot development. We know Walt and Jesse are in quite a pickle here prior to the final scene here in this episode. But yeah, quite a twist here, and I absolutely love this scene through and through. And of course, following this, we then get to the basically one last long final act and scene here in this episode. We see Tuco shooting at the cow here out in the wilderness. Of course, I definitely have seen the point, the sort of I don't know if I technically call it a plot hole, but he has the sort of sight on his gun when he's shooting at the cow. But of course, following this, it's then revealed. It's never revealed to us him taking off the sight, but at some point in time, he does take the sight off because it's no longer on his gun for the remainder of the scene. And of course, before I get into this final scene here, in respect to what leads to Tuco Salamanca's death and Hank Schrader showing up, real quickly before I get into that, I always did wonder how Hector Salamanca ended up in this house out here in the country, because like I talked about a little bit earlier at the very top of this stream, the last time we see Tuco, of course, not Tuco, the last time we see Hector, of course, is at Don Eladio's hacienda, but the last time we see him in Better Call Saul, he took only a sort of trip there, a day-night trip, an overnight trip, if you will. And of course, he's still living in Casa Tranquila. And it's never revealed to us ever in the plot of Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad how and or why Hector ended up out in this house here in the country. And of course, we know that following Tuco's death here in the scene, he will then be brought back to Casa Tranquila. But I've always wondered what sort of got him out in this house here in the country. And I know a lot of people have said, well, maybe this is just sort of a cartel safe house, and he was only here for a little bit because he was going to bring him down to Mexico too with his cousins. But at the same time, I always wondered if this is sort of a theory that I always had about how maybe following Tuco getting out of jail, and I always go back to that last shot that Lalo ever took of his uncle in Casa Tranquila, of him with that birthday hat on his head, singing happy birthday as he leaves in a Bad Choice Road, where he's sort of saying, like, my God, I can't believe we're leaving him here in this situation. And again, we don't know exactly when Tuco got out of prison. Again, the dialogue is very up in the air based on what Lalo said in Better Call Saul in that episode and what Skinny Pete said, where we don't know if his dialogue is actually canon or whether or not he's not 100% sure how long it's been since Tuco got out of prison. But neither here nor there. I always thought that maybe that once Tuco got out, he couldn't stand to see his uncle in that sort of situation in Casa Tranquila, so he brought him out to this house here in the country to live. And who knows, maybe Hector had been living here ever since Tuco got out of prison. It's technically possible. At the same time, it definitely looks like Hector is unable to take care of himself, so I wonder who's taking care of him. I wouldn't imagine that Tuco took care of him all the time. Maybe he sort of hired people to take care of him. Maybe he's more independent than we think, and he's able to sort of take care of himself out here in this house in the middle of nowhere. But at the end of the day, we don't know. We don't know if this was just a safe house where he had been living in for just for a little bit prior to them being smuggled down to Mexico. But I always wondered if maybe he was living here for about a year ever since Tuco got out of prison, and he just could not stand to see his uncle living in a place like Casa Tranquila, so he felt like, you know what, I'm taking him out of here. This is just undignified for my TO. He's not living here, not while I'm alive to see it. So, again, it's definitely possible. I always wondered. We'll never know, unfortunately, but yeah, it's that's just sort of the theory that I have that is maybe possible. Yeah, that's Sam Fisher. He definitely wanted to bring him to Mexico. It definitely sounded like he was gonna. I mean, it's not actually revealed to us in this episode, but it is possible that maybe like he wanted to take all three of them, himself and the cousins, down to Mexico with him. But yeah, definitely seemed that way. Justin Cruz, Anton, maybe that house was a safe house to lay low for the DA and cops, and it is close. It is so close to Mexico. He could go faux back. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's probably one of those things. Either he was always in Casa Tranquila and he was just pulled out right before the shit hit the fan for Tuco and his operation, or Tuco, I think, pulled him out of Casa Tranquila around the time he got out of jail because he couldn't see him. He could not see his uncle living in a place like that, because we have to remember the dialogue that's said here in this episode where, old people, you feed them, you put them in a real nice crib out here in the country. Again, sort of alluding to the fact that Hector had been there for a while. That's my sort of reading of that dialogue. I mean, maybe it's only a week or two, maybe it's a year, we don't really know. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we never will know how Hector got out here in the country. And it's unfortunate. Again, that's a whole nother thing where I kind of made a sort of community post about it, about how, the sort of SpongeBob meme about how, would have been nice to see all these little details that happened between '05 and '08. But of course, at the end of the day, I used that cliche too much. The story was about Jimmy and Kim. It wasn't about '05 to '08 Albuquerque criminal underworld prior to Walter White. And unfortunately, it is what it is. But yeah, that's sort of my theory. Either it was right before the DEA raided his headquarters that he brought him out from Casa Tranquila, or he did it right around the time Tuco got out of jail because he couldn't stand to see his uncle living in a nursing home like that. So, and yeah, it's kind of crazy how Mark Margolis, the actor who plays Hector, is. When does this come out? This is what, 2008, I want to say, when this episode comes out, maybe 2008. And this is what, like, I can't do math, like 14 years prior to season 6 of Better Call Saul. But again, the aging is no problem whatsoever. It's amazing. He's so much younger. And he's almost, a decade and a half younger than he will be. Probably even more than, a decade and a half younger than he will be in season 6 of Better Call Saul, the actor. But it's really not that noticeable with the beard and everything. I mean, maybe his sort of body, his physical body is a little bit younger, like it appears younger. But yeah, it's really not a bad continuity error whatsoever in respect to, the gray beard for sure. It really helps. So yeah, really not, in terms of visual continuity, it's pretty amazing how it kind of worked out this way. So yeah, just unbelievable scene here. Again, I talked about it. I don't want to sort of get bogged down in every little detail where Hector mean mugs them. Walt and Jesse try to sort of explain their way out of the situation. Of course, alas, no cigar. Tuco basically saying, "What did you do to my Tio? My Tio does not lie. Did they hurt you?" Them trying to sort of make any sort of alibi to explain. Exactly, I told you not to change the channel, man. We changed this channel, and like Tuco almost wanting, please tell me that this is it. How I can trust these guys. You're mad at them because it's this trivial little thing. It's not a really big deal. They change your channel. We can move on. We'll live happily ever after in the super lab in Mexico. But of course, when it's revealed to us that this is not the case, he then sort of communicates to them that, they are punking you. Of course, Tuco then grabs Jesse by the sort of collar here and drags him out of the house. Walter then comes by after this. Just as a sort of quick aside here, apparently during the filming of this scene here, I mean, great sort of last shot here where Hector sort of got the better of Jesse here. And it is kind of crazy to think about how, of course, in the end, this would end up backfiring and lead to the death of his nephew. But it is sort of crazy to think about how the Hector had such a propensity for violence and anger, and how, that scene where he's shooting Nacho's corpse in the face and where, he probably wants to just absolutely strangle to death Walt and Jesse right now. But of course, just based on his physical incapacitation, he cannot do so. So it just, the anger that he's probably exhibiting here in his head, and kind of his almost just reveling in the fact that, my nephew is going to basically, chop you up and leave you for the buzzards, essentially, is he's reveling in the moment right now, even though for his sake, unfortunately, his his nephew's going to die here. But yes, at Stone Yoda, right on, as I was about to say. Apparently, during this scene here, Aaron Paul was thrown into this sliding door so violently by Raymond Cruz that apparently he got a concussion and was knocked out unconscious. So pretty sort of crazy acting here for Aaron Paul in this scene. But yeah, he apparently was literally knocked out unconscious. If I can try to find this, it's going to be so hard to find the exact scene here when you're scrolling. But yeah, it's just kind of a quick. Yeah, this scene here. Apparently, when he was thrown in this door, oh my goodness, that was a violent fall. He apparently landed so violently that he got a concussion. That is crazy. And then apparently following this, he actually threw himself out because Raymond Cruz didn't want to hurt him and he refused to do the stunt. Okay, that's interesting. But I do know that when he was being, I don't know if it was when he was thrown up against the sort of wood paneling here after that initial fall. But yeah, he took a fall there for sure. Like, he was just crazy how he actually got a concussion here from this scene. And yeah, Tuco basically sort of, extorting Walt here, saying like, if you don't tell me what you did, I'm going to shoot this man, your partner here in the back of the head. But of course, following this, again, I always wondered if Walt saw Jesse reaching around for that brick in the dirt here. But, Walt kind of says, we tried to poison you. But I would imagine that he saw Jesse looking for that brick because, he basically is, giving himself up here. Where, if Tuco somehow gets the upper hand here, he's gonna shoot both of them and kill them for, I guess, betraying him. But of course, like I talked about a little bit earlier, Tuco is absolutely keyed up on meth here, not thinking rationally whatsoever. He's then hit in the head with a rock by Jesse. Of course, initially starts wrestling him. Of course, because Jesse he hits him in the face, and then Jesse starts beating the crap out of him, if I'm not mistaken, here with this rock. And so, yeah, Tuco did have that gun in his back pocket the entire time, but I guess, probably wasn't thinking about it. Maybe he was trying to reach for it. I mean, it would be kind of, I kind of have to play this scene again, but it would be kind of, I don't want to. But yeah, so yeah, Jesse kind of goes after him right away and, gets the upper hand of him here and eventually gets his gun and shoots him in the side and totally incapacitates him. He's then bleeding out and kicked into the ditch by Jesse. Of course, they don't give him the coup de grace because Walt says, let him bleed out, sort of to kind of paraphrase Gus Fring, maybe the bullet to the head would have been too humane for someone like Tuco, following everything that just transpired. Of course, they get into Jesse's Monte Carlo and try to drive away, but his keys are left at the in Tuco's. I don't know if they're left in Tuco's house or they're on Tuco's person, but Tuco has the keys. But of course, following them realizing they don't have the keys, they then see a car approaching very rapidly. Walt thinking that maybe it's the cousins. Of course, in a hurry to leave the car, he leaves the M16 in Jesse's Monte Carlo, and they go out in the distance here and take cover, sort of wondering who is in the car. It's then revealed to us that Tuco is still alive and gathers himself. Probably, I definitely have seen like TV shows where people who are high on meth will be like tased or sometimes even shot, and they are still able to just, power through the pain, and they almost don't even realize that they're shot here. So I guess this is sort of meth strength, if you will, for Tuco Salamanca here in the scene. But of course, as he gathers himself and walks to Jesse's car, it's loading here for some reason. Okay, hopefully, yeah. So he gathers himself and walks to Jesse's car. Of course, the LoJack detection bringing Hank right to Jesse's car, explaining how that Hank was able to find Jesse all the way out here in the boonies of New Mexico. Of course, when he sees this person sort of leaned over the car here, he says, "Jesse Pinkman, you're a tough man to find." Of course, much to Hank Schrader's just absolute surprise, he sees a bloodied, shot Tuco Salamanca with Jesse Pinkman's car, sort of in the moments, again, probably wondering how in the hell did I end up in this situation. Of course, all the details of this will be more discussed in the next episode, Bit by Dead B. But of course, following this, we see Hank say, "Take it easy," but of course, Tuco realizing the predicament that he's in, he sees the M16 in the car, and firefight ensues. Of course, Tuco's kind of in spray and pray mode here. Spray and pray mode. Not really shooting that clearly here. And of course, following them both running out of bullets, Hank is able to reload faster, get a clean shot at Tuco when he's reloading, and then, clean shot right to the head, thus ending Tuco Salamanca's story here alive in the plot of Breaking Bad after only 4 episodes on screen. Pretty crazy to think about. No rough stuff type deal. Crazy handful of nothing prior, of course. Grilled in 737. So yeah, Tuco only appears in 4 episodes, but man, did he have an unbelievable impact in the story. Crazy to think that he only appears in 3 episodes, if I'm not mistaken, in Better Call Saul. Uno at the very end. He also appears in Miho and Gloves Off on screen. And of course, following Hank walking up to Tuco's corpse, making sure that he's actually dead. Of course, he was shot in the shot square in the head, so I don't know how anyone would survive that. Of course, when Walt then realizes that, oh my God, that's Hank, that's my brother-in-law, we have to get the F out of here. Of course, when he says Hank, Jesse even says who, not realizing who this person even is. He then beelines it to behind the he beelines it for the New Mexico wilderness through the barbed wire fence. Of course, it's definitely. I always wondered why maybe Hank didn't see someone running out in the distance. Of course, Jesse's car is still bouncing, making a lot of noise. He's over Tuco's body, making sure that he's completely dead, even though that he's shot in the head here. And we then hear the ding in the distance of Hector Salamanca, thus ending this unbelievable second episode here in season 2 of Breaking Bad. And yeah, like I talked about, my goodness, was this an intense, great episode at Ray Michalowski. I apologize if I mispronounced that name, but yeah, intense episode to say the least. But yeah, it's my goodness, did I love this episode. And even that sort of detail that I talked about right on the top about how, the New Mexico DEA didn't really concretely know about Tuco's cartel connection. That was kind of a little bit of a head scratcher, but as I sort of discussed it a little bit and sort of, ruminated on it a little bit earlier in the stream, it definitely doesn't seem like as big of a plot hole as it maybe did appear after my 30th watch here of this episode. But yeah, at Sam Fisher, superhuman strength, same thing with a mom and her child under a car. She's able to lift. Even though I definitely heard that for sure, where, even if someone is able to sort of muster that superhuman strength and lift the car, it's not like, they're Superman and then they just sort of had these magical powers and they have no physical effect. They'll probably rupture every disc in your back to sort of lift that car. But I see what you're getting at there for sure in respect to Tuco being all meth up here, or meth up, if that's a sort of verb. But Francis Ray, at the moment, Hank thought Tuco was Jesse. Yes, he did, as he was leaning over that car. Quite the reveal for sure. At Better Finger Walta, I love the moment when Tuco looks at the gun in the car. Hank sees him looking at something and gets very nervous. Yes, indeed. Tuco sees that Walt left that M16 in the car and sees it as an opportunity to be exploited. Like I said, if he doesn't engage Hank in this firefight, he's no doubtedly going to prison. That is for sure, just based on his fingerprints, his bloodied fingerprints being on No Doza's corpse, as was discussed earlier in this episode. At Stone Yoda, Hank has that Red Dead Redemption Deadeye. Again, I've never played. I know that game. I've never played it. I will take your word for it at Stone Yoda. But yeah, that was quite the shot there. He definitely squared his feet and sort of shot to kill there. That was a headshot right between the eyes. Pretty crazy, right in the forehead. That was a kill shot for sure. I don't even know how he would think that Tuco was still alive here, but I guess better be safe than sorry. At Safe Houses 211, the first time I watched Breaking Bad, when I got to this episode, I thought it was the best one yet. Yeah, absolutely. I remember just sort of after the first episode, I binged it, so I didn't have too much time to ruminate on it, but I could only imagine the people watching it live sort of thinking, how in the world is Walt and Jesse going to get out of this predicament? And it's sort of out of the fire into the frying pan here, where following them escaping here and Jesse's car being sort of at the scene of the crime, and Walt basically sort of having to justify this, world's most expensive alibi and sort of get Jesse off scot-free as well, which we will see in the very next episode. But yeah, lot to unpack as this unbelievable season unfolds after this amazing episode here. At Justin Cruz, Hank walked into a bullet Hank walked into a bullet. OMG, he killed him. He got major PTSD. Yeah, he definitely got some PTSD after this for sure. He was definitely putting on airs the sort of machismo where he wasn't emotionally impacted by it, at least putting on airs and feigning that he felt that way at Justin Cruz. But, kind of being a sort of, typecast, type of, masculine person who doesn't want to wear their emotions on the sleeve, kind of thinking it's, not a good look for a man. Sort of, Hank Schrader's sort of beliefs. Definitely a ton of PTSD from this scene when he chucks Tuco's grill into the water later this season. Not to mention the PTSD he's going to experience when he goes down to El Paso, when he sees the death of the Federale and the other DEA agent get his leg blown off, and also seeing Tortuga's head on Tortuga's severed head on a tortoise. So yeah, a lot of PTSD to come for sure. And like I said, therapy may be the answer, and it definitely seemed to do wonders for Howard Hamlin. And I know that a lot of people don't find it to be very productive, or not very masculine or something to that effect. But maybe sort of not bottling up your emotions is the most healthy thing to do. And not sort of resort to just sort of, hiding away from the world like Hank Schrader did, or just consuming large quantities of methamphetamine as Jesse Pinkman did in order to deal with his emotional sort of stresses. So maybe he should have went to therapy as well, like Howard Hamlin. But that is a discussion for a different video. At Sam Fisher, thank you again so much for the super chat. Really appreciate the support. Do you think Walt is more suited for Hank's job as he doesn't suffer from PTSD like Hank? Like Hank does. Do you think Walt would suffer as well with the same stuff? That's an interesting question at Sam Fisher. So that's interesting. I mean, there definitely was a little bit of PTSD if you remember back to season 1 of Breaking Bad, in the episode entitled Cancer Man, when he finally reveals to Skyler at the end of the previous episode that he has cancer, and they're at the cookout and he's sort of cooking the chicken, and he sort of hears the sort of screeches from the chicken cooking, and he's sort of, like zoning out and sort of, definitely seeming to have some sort of flashbacks to Crazy 8 and Emilio's chemically disincorporated corpses, and sort of, thinking about their corpses when he's cooking that chicken. So he definitely seems to have a little bit of PTSD, but not as much as Hank Schrader. So I don't know. That's sort of an interesting counterfactual, if you will, about whether or not Walt would have been more suited for this like DEA lifestyle. Definitely possible. I mean, the interesting point is, though, that prior to his cancer diagnosis, there's just no way in the world that he ever would have done a job like that. That's the thing. Where, maybe in an alternate universe, within the multiverse, had Walter White pursued a role in law enforcement, maybe he would have excelled in that just based on his Heisenberg persona. I never actually thought about that question, to tell you the truth. That's an interesting sort of question that you raise. But just based on the nature of Walter White's character and him being this sort of Mr. Chips character who never took any risks in life, and sort of was the, underachieving high school chemistry teacher with no real spine or backbone, those sort of qualities don't really seem conducive to success in a career in law enforcement. But at least, especially being a field agent like Hank Schrader was in the early seasons of Breaking Bad. But, I guess somewhat ironically, just the sort of Heisenberg persona would have made him, suited to do, maybe a legal profession like being a law enforcement officer, as opposed to cooking methamphetamine and killing people in the sort of Albuquerque criminal underworld drug game. So yeah, interesting sort of counterfactual that you raised there. Something I've never actually thought about at Sam Fisher. I guess it's possible, but again, there's a lot of sort of what ifs that go into that question. If I have to be completely honest, that Sam Fisher, like I said, prior to the cancer diagnosis, he never would have even pursued it. And again, he sort of, we don't know what it would have been like prior to the sort of cancer diagnosis as well. I mean, even when he had to kill Crazy 8, we saw him break down in tears saying, I'm sorry, I have to do this, and while I guess in the moment he was able to sort of swallow his emotions and sort of just trudge forward more than Hank was, as opposed to Hank, who really sort of reveled in these things, especially after what happened in Juarez. Not El Paso, it was in Juarez, actually, that Tortuga scene I misspoke a little bit earlier, but where he literally was bedridden and couldn't leave the house because of the PTSD. It's definitely an interesting question you raised, I have to say. And yeah, something I've never actually thought about. But yeah, really appreciate the support. And yeah, it's an interesting question at Sam Fisher. It's an interesting question for sure, I'd have to say. Yeah, Francis Ray, once Walt got the taste of blood. That is for sure. I mean, he definitely wasn't sort of like a sociopath like Lalo who had no emotions, who would kill and not even think about it. I mean, even in the moment, I mean, there was still like emotional attachment. I mean, there's that great scene down the line in Mandela, if I'm not mistaken, when he's going into Jesse's house and he has to do the drug deal and get all the meth really quickly. But of course, when Skylar texts him and says, "Baby coming," he says, "No, not now." The emotional reaction is still there. He's not sort of this like, emotionless sociopath completely at that point in time. But yeah, definitely the evolution was very sort of rapid and precipitous for Walter White once he got that taste for blood at Francis Ray. I would have to agree in that respect. That's a great point that you raised. What is up, Taco Truck Engineer as well? Hi there. How's it going? Glad everyone for tuning in, even for just a little bit. I really appreciate all the support. At Stone Yoda, Hank needs to go see that shrink Marie sees. Can't remember his name. Yeah. Oh, the name is escaping me. Yeah, his name is revealed to us, and it's actually displayed to us in season 5 of Breaking Bad. We see the one therapy appointment of Marie Schrader. Oh, the name is escaping me. Such a minor character. I don't remember Marie Schrader's therapist's name. But yeah, he definitely he again, I know there's different types of therapists. There's psychoanalysts and different types. Maybe she was going to a therapist who was more specialized in someone with being a kleptomaniac. But yeah, interesting point you raised there for sure, at Stone Yoda. Yeah, prison scene again. That's much later in the development at Sam Fisher. Absolutely. Walt, like I said, Walt's development was rapid, and once the snowball started rolling, Dave, that is Sam Fisher. Dave, that is right, Dave. Good call there. Good pull. But yeah, once that snowball started rolling, there really was no stopping it. It really was sort of like a runaway freight train. So that just kept growing and growing and growing, metaphorically in respect to Walter White's sort of callous cold-bloodedness over the course of the series of Breaking Bad. Stone Yoda, when he killed Mike, that was some sociopathic behavior, or maybe just a man with a very fragile ego. A lot of me thinks it's the latter. He did. I feel like he was sort of genuine when he said, "I'm sorry, Mike. I didn't want all of this to happen." But his sort of hair trigger, sort of temper in terms of his pride and ego, as Mike was saying, I would kind of lean towards the latter, Stone Yoda, as I was saying. I would kind of lean towards the latter, but that's an interesting point you raised for sure. At Sam Fisher, cold, calculated murder like Gus. Yeah, those prison killings. Yep, I'd have to say so. And as sort of personable and charming as Gus Fring is, he is a ruthless killer as well. And I think he was absolutely sincere when he said to Walt in the desert, if you try to interfere with me dealing with your brother-in-law, I will kill your wife, I will kill your son, I will kill your infant daughter. Nothing will stop me in terms of, achieving my goals and avenging the death of Max Arciniega. So, at Hine, killing Crazy 8 was major step from Walt to Heisenberg. Therapist's name is Dave. Yes, definitely Dave. And yeah, again, it was a step-by-step process. It didn't happen overnight, but it's kind of like it's whatever. There's definitely a word for something that, it was exponential. That's the way I would say. Walter White's transformation was exponential, where, while it started off, small, as it grew, it just kept growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And I definitely think that's a sort of great way to sort of describe the sort of Mr. Chips the Scarface transformation that occurs for Walter White over the course of this series. Yeah, again, that's a great point you raised, Hine. I'm not a sort of psychologist. I'm not an expert on that for sure. But yeah, again, it's sort of a lot of people, there's a lot of illogical emotional decision making over the course of this series. And again, I always think back to that scene in Tahajli when he gets that text from Jesse where he thinks that Jesse found his barrels of methamphetamine. But of course, if he had just stepped back for a moment and thought, this isn't possible, he wouldn't have trudged out into the Indian reservation where he buried that money, and thus sort of, was the climax of this series and led to the death of Hank Schrader and everything that transpired in Ozymandias. So yeah, At the end, I feel like a lot of it is, I've talked about this in the past too. Despite how intelligent characters like Lalo and Gus and Walter White are, despite how Vince Gilligan says they're geniuses, at the end of the day, they're still human beings. And in the grand scheme of things, I mean, they're not computers. I mean, human beings are not artificial intelligence. They don't just constantly just compute and think and are always rational. Like human beings have emotion and they do irrational things. And I mean, that's just the nature of human beings, and that's sort of the sort of emotional, irrational decision making is really the downfall of even the most intelligent characters in this universe. So, yeah, a lot of food for thought here as we rewatch season 2 of Breaking Bad here, and yeah, like I said, this is such a great season. Again, much longer. I mean, the last season was only 7 episodes. I mean, season 2 is 13 as per the episodes to come. So much to discuss here. So many great episodes. I mean, Bit by Deadbeat. I mean, just unbelievable. All the interrogation scenes there. Down is quite the episode as well. I mean, when Jesse getting kicked out of his house there. I mean, unbelievable episode. I mean, there's so much. I mean, I don't want to skip ahead of myself here. I mean, 4 Days Out, Negro y Azul. I mean, Saul Goodman comes into the fold this season. Gus Fring comes into the fold this season. So many major characters are displayed to us. So much plot development here. And it's just going to be great to sort of see and talk about for sure. Absolutely. But yeah, that's Sam Fisher. Great quote. Absolutely. But yeah, with all that being said, like I feel like I sort of Peekaboo's another great one as well, where things kind of come to blow. The sort of B story that happens with Gretchen and Walt at the restaurant, and Jesse going to a spooge and some lady's house. All the great montage scenes that happen at Hine. I like to think that after Walter White died, he and Mike had a drink at Paul's bar. I see what you're doing there. It's a nice thought for sure. At Stone Yoda, 4 Days Out is a top 4 episode for me. That is an unbelievable Sam Fisher. Great pool there. I'm a blow fit. Unbelievable episode. That was Negro y Azul, if I'm not mistaken, where, he equates himself to a blowfish. I'm blowfishing this up. I mean, great scene there with Jesse just, eating Funyuns and using marijuana and smoking and sleeping on that. Eating Funyuns, smoking marijuana, and sleeping on that just sleeping bag on the floor. And I have to say that one of my all-timers in this season as well is the 4 Days Out quote of smoking marijuanas, eating Cheetos, and masturbating do not constitute plans in my book. That is an epic burn by Walter White for sure. That is an all-timer right there. And yeah, so just so much, like I said, so much great comedic relief within the incredibly dark nature of the show. And it's kind of crazy, as dark as the show is so far through, 2 episodes into season 2, it just gets darker and darker from here. It really is. And yeah, I mean, that scene of Gail Bedecker at the very end of season 3, oof, that one was tough. That one lingered. That one lived rent-free in my head for a while after I saw that scene, if I'm being honest. So yeah, a lot to talk about here, and I can't wait to get to it. At Dread Electric, what is up? Apple's 325 Gus. Sorry, I don't know what that's in reference to, but at Stone Yoda in the scene, he is about 25 Funyun bags around him. That is so true. That is so true. That is a great scene. He's literally eating out of like the fun pack there at Stone Yoda. He's not even buying the big bags. He's literally eating like the fun pack of Funyuns. So yeah, that's great. When he brings him out in the 4 Days Out, that is a great scene there as well at Sam Fisher. At Hine, thanks Anton, really love these retrospectives. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it for sure at Hine. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And with that, on that note, I'm going to have to wrap it up here. But yeah, like I said, really appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. Really appreciate all of the super chats, all the support. Really appreciate it. Like I said, really enjoy the conversation. A lot of things I never actually considered, even though I've seen this episode probably 2-3 dozen times. At Sam Fisher, great question. When's the next one? I'm going to try again. It was pretty weak sauce with how infrequently I was doing these. I will say that right now I will commit to, 99.9% positive that there will be another one of these on Tuesday. Maybe another one this week as well. Again, I'm trying to figure out how many I should do of these a week. I don't know if, maybe more than one a week is maybe too much. I'm not really sure. I feel like every day would probably be too much. Maybe one a week is maybe not enough. But for now, I'm going to try to do these on Tuesdays. We'll see. That kind of works for my schedule at Sam Fisher. But we'll see what happens in the future. But I've actually never heard of Wasabi Funyuns at Francis Rail. I'll have to look out for those. But yes, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in tonight. Really appreciate all the support. Really enjoy talking about this show. Have a great rest of your evening, wherever you are in the world, or a great rest of your morning if you are in Europe or anywhere else in the world. And I will see you guys around. Thank you so much. See you guys around.